Good. Well, let me try to introduce this small interview. I'm having the pleasure of with me today having John Beck from London, and he is from the project called Scan the World. He might explain a little bit more about it. But John, can you start telling me? You come with a platform with 16,000 objects online. You are the largest digital museum of anything printable, of cultural artifacts. So you are, in some ways, one of the most important museums, I think. What is Scan the World? What is your project about?
Sure. So Scan the World is an initiative I started just under 6 years ago, which all stemmed from an arts project that I was working on, which was discovering democratized technologies and disruptive devices, sort of working from an idea with photography. And I realized that by taking a series of photographs in a method called photogrammetry, can be done with your smartphone or a digital camera, by taking a lot of photos and then using open source software, you can stitch those photos together and turn it into a 3D model. And then using other open software, you can turn it into a 3D printable model. And at the time, and even more so now, fabrication technologies like FDM 3D printing, which is like the normal plastic 3D printing that you see, they're so cheap. It's so cost effective for the cost of maybe 10p. So from taking the photos to making it 3D printable, it's less than £1, and then that can be replicated. So I started walking around different museums in London, where I'm based, taking a lot of pictures. So going around, I took thousands and thousands of photos every day before going back home, stitching those photos together and turning them into 3D printable models, and then put them online and shared that openly, and then shared the 3D printed models with the museums to see what they thought of it. So naturally, the sort of response was a little bit sort of, "Oh God, someone just sort of duplicated our whole collection. What does this mean?" So it was a new way of thinking. But after a few years of me sort of working with the community in sort of getting people into museums, learning about the sculptures and the technology, we managed to build up this really large archive of objects from around the world. So
Yeah.
I started in London, but the community is worldwide, and they're sort of as important as sort of Scan the World is. It's a community-built initiative.
Yeah.
So a large portion of the collection is sort of scanned by humans. They end up from either museums to a very personal object, or to a piece of architecture which is very special to a very small sort of town in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. So we're getting culture from all across the world and copies of culture as well. So it's not disrupting the original object, but more so sort of sharing a copy of it and sharing
Yeah.
a story of it,
Yeah.
for the greater good of remixing and education and such.
I read about your work. You have been 2 weeks in the summer at the Statens Museum of Art in Copenhagen, and that was the reason why I actually found out who you were and read about your project. You managed to do 2,500 scans of 3D models or of uh, sculptures at their museum. So that was what you did yourself, but you now you mentioned community building. So is that also a step for Scan the World?
Exactly, yeah. So the project is split into two,
Mm,
really. The main sort of part of it is democratized technologies. It's about sort of enabling a community to be able to have a story of their own heritage and share it with the world, but also to sort of appreciate other things and build new skills and bring the objects into classrooms or into hospitals or into places where people can't visit, museums. So the underlying purpose for all of this, much like the Open Glam and what the SNK Open project is doing, is to bring culture to the masses and to allow for an open discourse between the people and the heritage, which is rightfully theirs in a way. So this kind of goes against the grain of a traditional museum approach, who often close off their collections for various reasons, whether that be economic or just legally can't actually do it. But what we want is for the community to kind of reclaim this kind of culture. So that's one major part of it, and that's a big reason why I work on the project, is to connect humans with the culture, but also new technologies. But the other side of things is that I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with museums using a high quality scanner, which can't be necessarily done so easily with photogrammetry or using your smartphone. This is a much more expensive scanner called the Artec Eva. And I'll go to the museums and scan as much of their collections as possible, with the same intent of releasing them openly online. And for what is happening, or whenever a new technology is introduced to a museum, there's a lot of companies who will try and make as much money out of that as possible. And where digital funding in museums isn't sort of always there, especially for smaller museums, nor is the education there, the sort of the fetishization of this new technology will encourage these big businesses to charge a lot of money to work on one object. Where I'm able to, with the power of the community and then also the support from the people giving me the 3D scanner, is that, and I work on this with a very small team of me and my assistant, that I don't cost any money and we're non-profit. So it's easy for us to go out to the museums and scan to a very high quality, which can be used for 3D printing or animation or virtual reality, whatever they like. But the high quality models are there, which is what a lot of museums look out for. So it's been really, really nice working with the SMK to sort of share that mindset and ideology of open data with such a wonderful team as well, such a friendly team, with the intention of exploring these new technologies, which 3D printing, 3D scanning, they're fairly new, and only recently have they been sort of picked up properly by the masses. But it's great to see museums, especially the leading museums, wanting to embrace that and supporting a smaller initiative, to sort of be a part of something which is built both by museums but also by the people.
But if they have the right attitude or the right approach to what they want with their collection, they could actually team up with you and being able to have a digital collection of their artworks. Is that
exactly? Yeah, exactly. And I work with museums for free. I don't want to charge them for digitizing their whole collections, because they put out a lot of effort and energy in that, and the fact that they support Scan the World and being a part of my ecosystem, by letting me host their files, but they have total ownership of the data. That sort of respect, that mutual respect, is all I kind of need. And because I'm fortunate to be able to do all of this for free, creates a very nice relationship between the people, myself, and the museum, as this co-working space online. So if a museum can sponsor my trip by paying for my flights or my accommodation, that's perfect. I don't cost anything else apart from lunch and dinner, which usually museums will give me a little bit of money from the museum's cafe, which is perfect. I live in there. The SMK's cafe is delicious.
Okay.
Would recommend.
So just to wrap up, if one wants to have visiting them, they should consider having a decent cafe at least.
Exactly. And a lot of coffee.
Yeah. So have you thought, first of all, I've just read your guide where you explain for galleries, museums, archives, how to get in contact with you, and I think it's very nice for me as a Creative Commons person to read about that you are aware of ways of licensing the work, and also when visiting your site, that I can actually see each license that comes with the work. So I think in that way the museums have a very robust partner in having you both as a scanner but also as a way of telling them what license might be the most suitable for their kind of approach.
Exactly. I think that's a major part of what I wanted to do, was not just scan for the sake of it and throw it onto a platform without any curation, which is very easy for people to do and just create this sort of big database without any archival information, any metadata or anything like that. I wanted to make sure from the very first object, even if it's either a scan which I work on with a museum or if it's sort of contributed by someone externally, is to make sure that every single object is appropriately categorized and is given the correct license. So if someone scans a contemporary artwork, which is maybe still an IP, before we approve it, we'll speak with the agent or the artist and try and raise that discourse to see what they think about it. If at the end of the day they're not willing to have that collection or that object online, then we don't put it online.
Yeah. I think your focus on metadata and collecting all the rights and all the people who are involved in creating the work and so on, this is also a way of doing it that might be inspiring and robust for other institutions to follow.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope, well, what Scan the World has been, it's like a sort of personal journey of the development of an art practice and the sort of joy of being able to get feedback from both the community and a museum, that I can kind of be a meeting point and serve as a bit more of a model digital archive or digital platform for museums to encourage a more community focus or some sort of it's not that you go to a museum and they're the gatekeepers of knowledge and they will feed you what they want. It's more about sort of an open-ended conversation between the museum and the people, the people whose objects these people belong to, but also sort of the museums who are creating such succinct well, they love the objects a lot. So having a fusion through the digital makes total sense.
When I look at your collection, I think there are so many possibilities. There are so many ways of playing with your things, with the models and so on. What are you looking forward to, or what have you noticed with your collections already that surprised you or gave you a big joy?
Gosh, there's been a lot of case studies, and I think every single person who comes to the collection comes out of it with a different interpretation, or so some of the things that I've seen people make, like a Mardi Gras float out of Lao Kun from Lao Kun and his Sons, printed huge and used in Mardi Gras. That was sort of for creativity, was really one big thing. People have put things into virtual reality. People have used models in adverts and a lot of printing projects of interior design. There's so much which people are doing, which they're kind of sharing back into this ecosystem of culture, of appreciation, and all of that. For me, I'm more on the accessibility front. I really, really enjoy the fact that something which can cost as little as 20p can be used to give access to culture to someone who can't necessarily access a museum. So recently, or maybe last year, 2 years ago, the team from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, they went to Great Ormond Street, which is a children's hospital in London, bringing a 3D printer and a computer to the hospital to share the digitized collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum with these children who could never really visit the museum. And what they could do was not just spin around the sculpture or print it, but also add, I don't know, a head of a stormtrooper or something onto a sculpture and giving them the full freedom to be able to do that. And then afterwards being able to print it and having it on their bedside table as a memory of the collection and something that they've been able to put their own interpretation on is a very special thing. So that, as well as working with sort of groups for the visually impaired, so what does museum's collection in the physical mean to the visually impaired or someone who doesn't have any sight, is that you're given maybe an audio tour say, I don't know, the Venus de Milo or something. It's a half nude female who's quite big and has no arms. That's kind of the most that you can get from it, but through tactile learning, through printing something this big for very, very little money and giving that to someone to be able to feel through tactile learning, to be able to actually understand what's going on, and sort of more than just someone speaking in your ear and expecting you to get it, but by having it in your hands opens up a whole new world to these people. And that's a major driving force for me, is to make culture as accessible to people as possible, especially with sculpture, which is made to be 3D. And say Barbara Hepworth made her sculptures to be touched. So sort of we're trying to push this idea that sculpture is a playful thing, and to be able to see it in the round doesn't mean having it on a screen and spinning it or having a photograph of it. It's have some fun, like move around it and see this object from all angles, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, it's education and accessibility, which are the major driving forces for me. And I'd love to see more projects like that come in the future. Of course, working with museums as well is a huge privilege for me, and being able to work with collections and the staff is just a huge joy for me. I'm going back to Stockholm next week
Oh,
to
yeah.
work with the National Museum there. It's part of the Sharing is Caring conference, which I'm very looking forward to seeing people there, because it's a joy for me to travel, and a joy for museums to take in my art collection or my art project, I suppose,
Mm.
and appreciate it.
Mm.
So I'd like to, yeah, do a lot more accessibility projects, do obviously a lot more traveling, helping more museums to digitize their collections in 3D, do some more 3D printing. But to be honest, I'm so excited to just see what the community makes of it and what they share back with me, and sharing their stories as much as I can, because it's the community who really, really do give context to the initiative.
I think you will be thrilled many times in the future, because I do love your project. I think it's so magnificent. I think it's the right way of using the technology that we have already, and at least using it in a democratized way, in a way that makes it possible for also people to use and love the cultural heritage, and also, as you mentioned here last, that we can actually now we are finally allowed to touch the
Yeah,
artwork.
exactly, which is
Disability,
fantastic.
without or with disabilities, you now we can actually touch it. And I think that's also the story between copyright and everything that's open, is that if it's copyrighted, you cannot touch, and if it isn't copyrighted, if it is under open terms in some way, you are allowed to touch it in some way. and and
Yeah.
and now you are actually proving that story to be true with physical objects. I think it's been a pleasure having you here in this digital room. I was hoping to meet you in person perhaps later, but the final thing, if anyone is interested in all these exciting things that you have been telling us about, where should they go and what can they do there?
So you can go onto our website, which is part of myminifactory.com, or if you just search for Scan the World, you can access the whole collection, and you can 3D print everything. You can use the data as much as you like. Please do share it back with us as well. Tell your stories. We want to hear as much from you as possible, because the community is everything. Um, but also, if you want to get involved and if you want to scan a sculpture, we've got tutorials online. If you just look into the learning section, we've got tutorials for photogrammetry. If there's anything that you need, you can email me at any time, which I guess is John, Jon, at myminifactory.com. But simply, it's just taking a lot of photos. We're going to release a new tool very soon where you don't need to actually have any software. So you upload the photos to our website, and it automatically creates a 3D model from that. So that's going to be coming out in the next month. So look out for that. In
Yeah.
the meantime, if you have taken any photos and want to share them with me, or don't have the opportunity to process them yourself, just send them my way, and I'll work with you one on one to get it online. So yes. that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I think this world is full of open initiatives and invitations, and thank you so much for taking your time telling us about your project.
Yes, thank you for having me.